The media greatly influences society. They inform people about what is happening. It permeates people's lives by creating their own criteria and opinions. In this way, the media moves the masses, creating different social movements.
For over 60 years, the people of Ambazonia were deprived of such privileges. The privilege to enhance their own criteria and opinion. They have suffered cultural genocide for 6 long decades, but not in this age and not with undaunted ABC Amber News on board.
You must understand that wars are fought and won in the media. The speed of the revolution on Ambazonia's quest for freedom cannot be explained without highlighting the diligent use of the media.
Franco-Cameroon colonizers, among other strategic moves, weaponized the media against Ambazonia for so long, and they continue to do so even today. The question would be, how much do the oppressed people of Ambazonia need to counter the media rage?
Indeed, how much more is required to stop the genocide? The carnage in Ambazonia didn't start today. In 1961, 1972, 1984, and 1992, Ambazonians were slaughtered in huge numbers and help was not forthcoming. Why? Because the oppressor was the piper in the media.
The good news is we have what it takes to dictate the pace.
Right now, See Amber TV is taking advantage of the wonders of multimedia aggressively
to inform the misinformed and disinformed with undaunted and other revolutionary programs bringing it to the news untold stories.
Most importantly, to win the media war by taking ABC Amber TV into every multimedia platform.
In a word, where the importance of storytelling can never be overemphasized, Ambazonians has to tell her own story, not the other way round.
And like we say it always, Ambazonia must narrate her story accurately. We can do this together, you know, right? You are just a click away. Visit our website at www.abcambertv.com, and the steps are quite simple.
With just a click on the website, you can become a club member with so many benefits.
You can also make a one-time donation, advertise and showcase your goods and services at the marketplace on the website.
That was easy, right? You're welcome on board.
And thank you for opting for the winning team. Good evening and welcome to this weekly briefing with Dr. Martin Mungwa. And we at Undaunted are delighted to host this very briefing. I am Star Smart. Let's begin. Tonight, we have the State of the Liberation Movement with Secretary Martin Mungwa, PhD, F.ASCE, with a topic on independence with or without dialogue. I'm sure you remember that part of President Sako's speech. As we anticipate this powerful briefing from Dr. Martin Mungwa, we have a couple of topics we will be tackling with Barrister team in BCF. Speaking in English to the 193 nation United Nations General Assembly, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky delivered a pre-recorded message to a standing ovation with the exception of the Russian delegation and a handful of other countries. It is sad that while the world hears of the war in Ukraine on repeat, the countries going through war, probably even more dreadful, are unfortunately overlooked. Meanwhile, a CGAI fellow gives us a lengthy policy perspective concerning the war in Amazonia. But it is important to know that Amazonians' ultimate goal is independence, and you cannot be diplomatic with justice. Well, like I said, we'll look in-depthly at this perspective tonight with Barrister team in BCF, but only after the prime headlines.
And these are the prime headlines for today. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has stated that Russia will be forced to think about peace. The Amazonia Restoration Forces of Baliyonga local government area have killed 8 La Republique de Cameroon soldiers after losing 1 general. Also today, Canadian Global Affairs Institute fellow gives 10 critical observations for the international community, pathways to peace in the Cameroon. Now, speaking in English to the 193 nation United Nations General Assembly, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky delivered a pre-recorded message to a standing ovation with the exception of the Russian delegation and a handful of one other country in the hall filled with world leaders and his own wife, First Lady Olena Zelenska. Zelensky was unable to travel to UN headquarters in New York City because of the escalation in attacks by Russia. Just as earlier, Russian President Vladimir Putin announced a large mobilization of Russian forces for the attacks against Ukraine and began preparation for a referendum to formalize its occupation of parts of Ukraine. Now, the referendum is considered a sham by the US and the European Union. Ambazonians, this is where we will begin the full briefings of Undente tonight. Sir Smart is here as always. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Onyi. Good evening, fellow Ambazonians. The Ukrainian president outlined peace formula that punishes aggression, restores security. President Volodymyr Zelensky of Ukraine addresses the general debate of the General Assembly's 77th session. 21st September 2022, the UN F.ASCE, Russia must be punished for its illegal war against Ukraine, President Volodymyr Zelensky told the UN General Assembly on Wednesday, part of a peace formula that also calls for greater civilian protection and defense support. Quote, the crime was committed against our state brothers. The crime was committed against the lives of our people. The crime was committed against the dignity of our women and men. The crime was committed against the values that make you and me a community of the United Nations. This is the same situation with our story. Great injustice has been done on us, and yet La République du Cameroun says to the international community that it's mere communal crisis.
Now, for the first time since the COVID-19 pandemic, heads of state and government are once again back together for their annual debate. Few weeks back, UN member states met to vote on allowing Mr. Zelensky to deliver his speech via video instead of in person. Speaking in English, the president outlined a peace formula that pushes aggression, protects life, restores security and territorial integrity, guarantees security, and highlights the importance of determination. Now, he stressed that it does not include neutrality. Of course, you know the place of neutrality in place of war. He says those who speak of neutrality when human values and peace are under attack means something else. He said they sympathize only for protocol, and that is why they pretend to protect someone, but in reality, they protect only their vested interests. Now, special tribunal and sanctions, President Zelensky said not only can the peace formula work for Ukraine, but for anyone who may find themselves in similar circumstances as we did. Now, that can be related to the Amazonian story. His punishment for the crime of aggression includes implementation of sanctions such as trade and travel bans.
A special tribunal should be created to punish Russia for the crime of aggression against our state. This will become a signal to all would-be aggressors that they must value peace or be brought to responsibility by the world, he said. But when you bring it back home, we are not saying that La République du Cameroon should be punished for the injustices meted on southern Cameroon's Amazonia. We are saying come to the negotiation table and let us dialogue. Let's discuss and have a way forward. According to Zelensky, we have prepared precise steps to establish such a tribunal. They will be presented to all states. Ukraine will appeal to the UN General Assembly to support an international compensation mechanism.
We the people, ABC Amber TV, Amazonia Broadcasting Corporation. The voice of the voiceless, the voice of Amazonia, connecting the world from Africa. With untold stories, Africa's best.
Reports reaching Undaunted from Ballyonga on Monday, 17th of October 2022 says a fierce confrontation took place in the hot La République du Cameroon, putting the valiant Amazonian Restoration Forces against the La République du Cameroon occupier Boy Scouts, calling themselves soldiers. In the encounter, one Amazonian Restoration Forces general named Kaskiro alone gunned down 8 colonial soldiers, sending them 6 feet before being gunned down by the enemy in the duel. It is alleged that over 100 La République du Cameroon military invaded Ballyonga this fateful day in the confrontation that lasted from 9 a.m. till about 4:42 p.m. Now, the invasion started from Sang, Kutidanchi, to Kushu, Tob, Balichi, and ended at the Poultry Center.
Well, the results: 1 Bali Amba down, 8 La République du Cameroon military down. It was all drama from Kutachchi, Sang, but at Tob Bilicha Junction, this brave Amba, popularly known as Kaskiro from Njenka, Ngengap combat unit, decided to brave it alone by firing at close range at the La République du Cameroon military, who foolishly advanced together like a flock of sheep. His gunshot alone pulled down 8 terrorists at once out of fear, and because his exact position could not be located, La République du Cameroon military survivors sprayed the area with varied military artillery as they escaped, dragging along their 8 fallen colleagues. A military helicopter left Bamenda immediately and landed at Bali Poultry Center with 5 armored cars, where both the dead and the survived La République du Cameroon military were quickly evacuated. 2 of the armored cars, which remained at Sang Kuchtajin Junction to wait for the return of the troops, were forced to escape through Ntanku, Ntamfoang to Njenka Hausa, where they joined the others as gendarmerie company for unique retreat and surrender. Although Kaskiro has died, Bali people shall live to honor him as the first freedom fighter in Amazonia to confront La République du Cameroon directly. La République du Cameroon terrorists, exactly. And for succeeding to cause 8 Francophone families to weep at once.
Now, this is not the first time Kaskira has demonstrated overwhelming military powers over La République du Cameroon military. Just a few months ago, the so-called professional military of La République du Cameroon, guided by an enabler at Njenka, who is a current CPDM councillor, surrounded his home at midnight. He fired against them seriously and succeeded to escape through the roof. And out of shame, La République du Cameroon military took away his wife to Batfoot, the bees camp. Today's battle registered a glorified name for him as a freedom fighter who has died on the battlefield after putting down 8 oppressors and agents of neocolonialism. It is most glorifying to know that La République du Cameroon, in a state of confusion, did not even know that an amber died as they sprayed the top Bilicha Junction with Russian-made chemical weapons and explosive.
Well, the real names of Kaskiro is Mbuku Ransom, a name to remember in the history of Amazonian struggle. Mbuku Ransom. That is one name we shouldn't forget in a hurry. For freedom from French, British, and La République du Cameroon, neo-colonialism and imperialism by the last survivor, General Muntetu Gua of Amazonia.
We the people, ABC Amber TV, Ambazonia Broadcasting Corporation. The voice of the voiceless, the voice of Ambazonia, connecting the world from Africa. With untold stories, Africa's best.
All right, so we have this interesting tweet here from John Akuro and Bo Herbert. Both of them disagreeing on the purported talks between separatists and the Cameroonian government. Now, on 14th of October 2022, John Akuro tweeted, says, interesting to know that Canada mocked at Amazonia, but continued financing PhD within the framework of the defunct Swiss mediation initiative. With Canadian money flowing in through HD, we ignored the insult or mockery then. That was definitely the election of duty. Now, at Bo Herbert replied, I chastised High Commissioner Richard Bale 2 years ago in an article and hold them accountable today, unlike you, unable to defend Southern Cameroon's cause for fear that Ottawa will cut off funding to your coalition for dialogue and negotiation.
Here under is a more interesting reply to John Akuro's tweet. It says, without belaboring much energy on whether there are talks or not taking place in at Ottawa City, at Canada between separatists and at PR Paul Biya oligarchical junta, let's look at it from this angle. A football scheduled match between Guzang versus Ashong has been agreed to play in Batibo. When all and sundry were expecting the match to be played in Batibo, where all the Widukum family and friends were preparing to be in the stadium, Guzang surprisingly pulled out without any concrete reason, justifications, and rational thinking. As people were condemning from the encounter, intriguingly, Guzang went behind and stealthily courted and bribed unknown Ashong purported players to meet them for a match in a secret location stadium no one knows in Ashong. No sane or reasonable person in Ashong will accept to play this match which Guzang is organizing without Batibo and the entire Widukum family and their friends who were supposed to be in attendance. Any footballer seen or heard planning to play a hidden match with Guzang is or are traitors and so don't speak or represent the football team of Ashong.
All right, so they continue to say, in concert to thereof, there is no meeting in Canada. If at all anything is talking or has taken place or even at Toronto, it is a gathering of Cameroon and Cameroonized Ambazonians, in quote, traitors, gearing towards trying to sell the narrative to the international community that despite Cameroon's pulling out of the Swiss mediation-led process, they, Cameroon, are still pursuing peace with separatists, as can be seen via these sensational headlines from fifth columnist who are also called men of the fourth estate, practicing yellow journalism. Now, to be a bit mild, there are basic principles of organizing a meeting. You must know the convener, participants, agenda, venue, and most importantly, the objective or objective. Now he continued to say, how come that he tagged CRTV Web and also said Cameroon Tribune aren't talking about the Canada Cameroon conference, but rather some Ambazonians that are selling the idea by trying to explain and justify some so-called Canadian talks. Now, you are indeed working for Cameroon, that's what he says, period. Now, let's go to the Blackbird with Chalk and how Ahidjo got some of us in doing his bidding. He goes on to say 2 years after the dissolution of all political parties by Amadou Ahidjo, making his party the only national party known as Union Nationale Camerounese UNC. The same Ahidjo in 1968 used Solomon Tandang Muna to overthrow Prime Minister Augustin Ngomjoa. He ended up dumping Muna after having promised later that he was going to hand over power to him.
Now, fast forward to 1991, Mr. Biya derided calls from the convening of a conference national sovereign as sans object. Intriguingly, he convened a tripartite conference purportedly aimed at putting in place new institutions, including a new electoral code within the framework of the new democratic dispensation. What did we see at that time? The so-called tripartite conference was all about the ending of the ghost towns operations that had crippled the economy. That is why since 1991, the wishy-washy tripartite conference, which gave birth to a non-existent 1996 constitution, is being progressively implemented 31 years and counting.
So, anyone dealing with Cameroon Republic should be abreast of their track record of deception, bad faith, machinations, and not honoring any agreement to it de jure or gentlemanly. Lastly, there was no meeting involving Cameroon versus Ambazonia in Canada. If there was, it was a gathering of people whose objective are at variance with the actualization of the restored independence of Ambazonia. I'm sure you found that tweet very interesting.
We the people, ABC Amber TV, Ambazonia Broadcasting Corporation. The voice of the voiceless, the voice of Ambazonia, connecting the world from Africa with untold stories, Africa's best. We the people, ABC Amber TV, Ambazonia Broadcasting Corporation. The voice of the voiceless, the voice of Ambazonia, connecting the world from Africa. Told stories, Africa's best. We the people, ABC Amber TV, Ambazonia Broadcasting Corporation. The voice of the voiceless, the voice of Ambazonia, connecting the world from Africa with untold stories, Africa's best. We the people, ABC Amber TV, Ambazonia Broadcasting Corporation. The voice of the voiceless, the voice of Ambazonia, connecting the world from Africa.
All right, sincerest apologies for that. We were duly informed that our volume wasn't audible enough for the hearing of everyone out there. All right, so we are here to retake the tweet of John Akuro and Bo Herbert, disagreeing on the purported talks between separatists and the Cameroonian government. All right. So on the 14th day of October 2022, John Akuro tweeted first and said, interesting to know that Canada mocked Ambazonian but continued financing the HD within the framework of the defunct Swiss Mediation Initiative, with Canadian money flowing in through HD. He says, we ignored the insults or mockery then. That was definitely dereliction of duty. Now, Bo Herbert replied. He says, I chastised High Commissioner Richard Bale in Canada 2 years ago in an article and hold them accountable today. He says, unlike you, unable to defend Southern Cameroon's cause for fear that Ottawa will cut off funding to your coalition for dialogue and negotiation.
Now, under that is a more interesting reply to at John Akuro's tweet. Without belaboring much energy on whether there is talks or not taking place in at Ottawa City, at Canada between separatists and at PR Paul Biya, oligarchical junta, let's look at it from this angle. A football scheduled match between Guzang versus Ashong has been agreed to play in Batibo. When all and sundry were expecting the match to be played in Batibo, where all the Widdicombe family and friends were preparing to be in the stadium, Guzang surprisingly pulled out without any concrete reason, justifications, and rational thinking. As people were condemning this withdrawal from the encounter, intriguingly, Guzang went behind and stealthily courted and bribed unknown Ashong purported players to meet them for a match in a secret location stadium no one knows in Ashong. No sane or reasonable person in Ashong will accept or to play this match with Guzang in which Guzang is organizing without Batibo and the entire Widdicombe family and the friends who were supposed to be in attendance. Any footballer seen or heard planning to play a hidden match with Guzang is and are traitors and so don't speak or represent the football team. Only I have something to say about this. It says they don't represent the football team of Ashong. This very simile quite explains the case of the purported Toronto, Canada meeting with Paul Biya's regime and the said Ambazonians. It really quite displays it. The simile is quite very, very accurate about this one. What do you think about this?
I think you're right. You're right. But then, in concert to that, the meeting in Canada, he says, if at all anything is taken or has taken place in Ottawa City or even in Toronto, he says it is gathering of Cameroon and Cameroonized Ambazonians. He calls them traitors. He said, geared towards trying to sell the narrative to the international community that despite Cameroon's pulling out of the Swiss-led mediation process a day, Cameroon are still pursuing peace with separatists, as can be seen via these sensational headlines from fifth columnists who are also called men of the fourth estate, practicing yellow journalism. He says, to be a bit mild, there are basic principles of organizing a meeting. You must know the convener, you must know the participants, you must know the agenda, the venue, and most importantly, the objectives. How come that he tagged CR, TV Web, Cameroon Tribune, aren't talking about the Canada-Cameroon conference, but it is rather some Ambazonians that are selling the idea by trying to explain and justify them the so-called Canada talks. You are indeed working for Cameroon, he says, period. Now, let's go back to the blackboard with Chuck and how Ahidjo got some of us in doing his bidding. He says 2 years after the dissolution of all political parties by Amadou Ahidjo, making his party the only national party known as Union Nationale Camerounese, UNC. The same Ahidjo in 1968 used Solomon Tandang Munar to overthrow Prime Minister Augustin Ngomdouar. He ended up dumping Munar after having promised the latter that he was going to hand over power to him.
Now let's fast forward to 1991, where Mr. Biya derided calls from convening of a conference national sovereign as sans object. Now, intriguingly, he convened a tripartite conference purportedly aimed at putting in place new institutions, including a new electoral code within the framework of the new democratic dispensation. What did we see at the time? The so-called tripartite conference was all about the ending of the ghost towns operations that had crippled the economy. That is why since 1991, the wishy-washy tripartite conference, which gave birth to a non-existent 1996 constitution, is being progressively implemented 31 years and counting.
All right, so he continues to say, so anyone dealing with the Cameroon Republic should be abreast of their track record of deception, bad faith, mechanization, and not honoring any agreement, be it to the jury or gentlemanly. He says, lastly, there was no meeting involving Cameroon versus Ambazonia in Canada. He says, if there was, he said it was only a gathering of people whose objective are at variance with the actualization of the restored independence of Ambazonia.
We the people, ABC Amba TV, Ambazonia Broadcasting Corporation. The voice of the voiceless, the voice of Ambazonia, connecting the world from Africa. With untold stories, Africa's best. We the people, ABC Amba TV, Ambazonia Broadcasting Corporation. The voice of the voiceless, the voice of Ambazonia, connecting the world from Africa. With untold stories, Africa's best.
This month, we had Chris W.J. Roberts, a CGAI Canada Global Affairs Institute Fellow, give us a policy perspective on 10 critical observations for the international community, pathways to peace in Cameroon. After giving a breakdown of how an avoidable crisis escalated to this full-fledged civil war that has hardly received a mention in the litany of armed conflicts afflicting the world today, down to the current state of the war between the two Cameroons, La République du Cameroon and Southern Cameroon's Ambazonia, he went on to give his number 10 critical observation designed to bring outsiders up to date if there is to be any hope for peace, justice, and prosperity for those living incredibly difficult lives in the two Anglophone regions.
All right, he says, one, the best permanent solution to the Anglophone crisis would be transparent, inclusive, negotiated peace process leading to a free and fair internationally supervised referendum that included a clear question on institutional arrangements, including independence, that would solve a historical wrong committed first in 1961 under British and UN auspices and again in 1972. It would signal an end to the political and economic marginalization perpetrated from Yaoundé. It is not a stretch to see parallels between Russia's quick annexation referendums in occupied areas of Ukraine in 2014 and 2022 and Ahidjo's hastily conducted unjust in May 1972 constitutional referendum, which allowed the entire population to vote, which reported 99% approval to dismantle a federal system expressly designed to accommodate the Anglophone minority. But it is also true that some of the local armed leaders on ground zero, that is at the home front, and some of the louder self-proclaimed leaders in the diaspora spend more time calling each other traitors than coordinating a united diplomatic and military front that might provide encouraging glimpses of future self-determination. Many of the most thoughtful and capable Southern Cameroons who would ultimately prefer independence if asked directly worry that there are insufficient institutions in place now to constrain the power hungry, the co-opted, or the well-armed during a transition process. However, many are working hard behind the scenes to bridge divisions and propose confidence building measures. They want to find creative ways to inch forward and educate the international community on the realities of how hard life has become, not only in the northwest and southwest regions, but also across Cameroon, given the government's regime maintenance priority. The main reason the government fights so hard against outright independence, federalism, or even direct negotiation is that an independent or more autonomous Ambazonia, given the human and natural resources available, could potentially outshine the rest of Cameroon in either democracy or economic growth. That would weaken the CPDM's vice grip on political and economic power, particularly the ruling family that is positioning a new generation to take over. All right, we have Barrister team based here in the studio. Would want to get his thoughts on this particular reaction. Star, you have something to say?
No, I think Barrister team does.
Hello, good evening,
Yes.
Barrister team. This year, thank you so much for joining us tonight on Undaunted. You were here with us yesterday, and you're here again today. We appreciate how you make it very easy to be here. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much. All right, sir. We would want to get your thoughts on the thoughts of this particular reaction.
Thank you once more for having me. You see, I have read that document a number of times, and this is my own take about it. Someone else has told me that that guy was OST, an advisor to the famous CDN. But that's not the issue. The issue is the ideas he put there. He's not alone. Those ideas have been put in different forms, in different ways. The same thing has been put out there. So if we are there, it's not because we lack ideas. The ideas are there. It is because, I can put it in my own words, our Bazonians lack a credible partner on the side of Cameroon. What does that mean? A partner who would like to accept the reality, who would like to accept facts legally and factually. And so if you don't have on that side, we will have to accept that facts are what they are. Facts don't lie. And we're not able to do anything. Are we invent the war? No. Are we here because we attacked the Republic of Cameroon? No. Here because we seized anything from them? No. So why are we here? What is it for? Why is it so difficult for La Republic to agree to discuss the root causes of the problem? That's where the issue lies. All those stories of ambassadors insulting themselves, doing this and that, that's the truth. But that is a result of frustration. When people are fighting and nobody is fighting, separating them, the other party is not listening, they resort to insults. I will insult your mother. You insult my father. You call me idiot. That's not the problem. It's not because it is not because whoever, or anybody has insulted President Sako or vice versa, that we're fighting. No, that's not the issue. The issue is that we don't have a credible partner from the other side. We have been very consistent. We say and repeat that we are and we were never part of the Republic to Cameroon. That's a fact. How did they come to get us to become their country? Is what they should be able to explain. We have said and insisted that the so-called Cameroon is not indivisible. It has always been divisible. Otherwise, how do they explain the fact that they have something called official languages, French and English? How does that come about? They have always been united. So they must accept these facts. I hear all those things like referendum and all those things put out by the guy there. We have never refused referendum. A referendum is a way of consultation. But the referendum doesn't just jump from the moon and fall on the ground. There's a groundwork laid for it. You're going to organize a referendum and ask the people what question. What are you going to ask the people? These are things that, if there must be a referendum, these issues have to be ironed out at the negotiation table. Otherwise, what are you going to organize a referendum and ask? And then who will be the organizers? How are they going to do it? Those are all issues that must be left on the discussion table. So it is not because we refuse any of those things. No, it is because the Republic refuses to see the reality. I was speaking to many people, for example. We disagree, for example, with the CDN. I personally, for one or two reasons. The first reason is that they didn't tell us the source of financing. But that's not even the important point. The most important point is that I believe there's no Ambazonian of any kind in this struggle who can pretend to be neutral. It cannot be neutral. This does not mean that I'm saying that they should support the IG position. No. Any Ambazonian in this country must have suffered the effect of this war in one way or the other. If your parents died or they burned your house, and in your mind it was Amba who did it, you're not going to be favoring them. If you lose somebody like me, I bet that was the military who did it. I cannot be neutral again. If I'm on the decision table, I will punish them. So everybody has been a victim. We are just all victims. A victim cannot be a referee. So the CDN cannot be pretending to be neutral when they are victims, because all of them are sold there are Ambazonians. And they are victims directly or indirectly. So they cannot be referee in a game where they are already victims. If their goal was to mobilize people to come together, and then they get a neutral referee, somebody is neutral because you have nothing to lose by telling the truth. We don't doubt among us, among Ambazonians, there are people who support Yaoundé. There is no doubt. All these people in ministerial positions, Atanganji, hundreds of others, mayors, they support Yaoundé. No problem with that. They are free to be to support what they want. But they must also admit that we, sitting right here, were against what they stand for. And the only way to iron the differences is to go to the table honestly and let me explain my position. They explain their position. And if it is necessary, we can then look for a middle of the way forward. Otherwise, there's nothing difficult. I've read that guy said 10 points. They are well thought of. Everybody is free. Something very good about it. Just like us, there are some ideas that some people might not accept. We are not perfect human beings. So that guy has put out something, some of which is quite good, some of which you can doubt, but he has the right to say what he says. That is his own expertise. Again, we are not here because we lack people who propose a number of things. We have had thousands of proposals, but implementation is the problem. Because those proposals you can only implement one or two or three of them on the negotiation table. And that is why those people who talk about negotiation put there without preconditions. You go to the table without any condition. Listen to the other party listen to you with the help of a referee. You come to something that is doable, acceptable. Without which, holding a meeting in Canada or Japan or wherever is not the issue. What is discussed in the meeting, the people who attended the meeting, and how to enforce whatever is decided there is what is important. So that's about piece of paper, which I think I've read about 4 or 5 times. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that in-depth analysis from your end there.
Well, we're moving on with the 10 perspectives from this CGAI fellow, Chris W.J. Roberts. We'll continue with the rest of his perspective. The second one he talked about, he said, in 2022, any immediate independence option is moot. Neither African Union nor UN members, let alone the regime in Yaoundé, have any appetite to consider a process that might lead to an immediate vote for an independent Ambazonia. The reality that independence is the best option to remove a tired, kleptocratic gerontocracy from the lives of 5 million or more Anglophones, but diaspora leaders have spread the meat for years now that the independence was just around the corner. Note, he says the meat, they have spread the meat that the independence is just around the corner. Now, this has weakened their legitimacy and prevented alternative, more realistic pathways to peace and justice that might ultimately include an independent option, but would also provide incentives and pressures for reforms across Cameroon, possibly reducing the need for complete independence. The third one, I think you should go with the third one.
All right, Barrister team, just please hold on there. According to Chris W.J. Roberts, he says the international community needs to accept that there is a non-international armed conflict in Cameroon and charge their approach. Now, for years, the Cameroonian government and international organization have purposely refrained from referring to the conflict as an NIAC or civil war. Now, he goes on to say current interpretations of what constitutes NIAC fails to capture the dynamics of the war in Cameroon and other places where the old model of one or two centralized military political organization fighting against a national government. Now, if you want to think about Biafra, who fought between 1967 to 1970, or the unitary against the MPLA in Angola until 2002, offers a clear-cut definition of organized opposition. Now, that's what he said. He says, lack of a single hierarchy of command, which among Ambazonians is true, does not negate that there are multiple armed units fighting for the same end, and which operationally and politically sometimes coordinate with other military and political groups. Barrister Ambisia, what do you have to say?
All right, so I think even react, I should bring to mind this particular statement from him that brought my attention. He said, this is CJ now saying that the reality is that independence is the best option to remove a tired kleptocratic gerontocracy, which we believe from the lives of 5 million or more Anglophones. This we believe. But then but diaspora leaders have spread the myth for years now that independence was just around the corner. Like, why would he call it a myth? I don't know. I think you should react to this, his second and third part of his perspective of the whole Cameroonian crisis.
Again, let us agree that this guy is writing as an individual. Whether he calls it a myth or anything is irrelevant. How he classifies it is not what is important. The important thing is what it is. It is not a myth. And he says it looks remote. Yes, it is remote. No independence has ever been on the forefront of anything in the world. When the Southern Sudanese started, it looked like a pipe dream. It was like a pipe dream. But they had it. In the 1960s, 70s, and 60s to 80s, you want to tell people in South Africa that apartheid would die, they would never have believed it. It was a myth. That's why, what did Nelson Mandela do? Or rather, just standing in the court and saying that this is, he was sentenced to life. So myths always appear in this sort of struggles. Yes, all of us had hoped that independence was coming the next day. But it doesn't come like that. If you look at other struggles for independence specifically, they take decades. They take decades. But they cease to be myth, they become a reality. So what he says is his opinion. It's not law. If the international community is not intervening, I beg to say, it's not because they don't know. No. There's nothing called international community, the individual countries. Let us take the important ones that will expect them to react. This is the United States. Do you know what is going on? Yes. Do you know it only from us? No. That's what I'm saying in Yaoundé. Take Great Britain. That brought us into this trouble. Do you know what is going on? Yes. I didn't know it all from us. No. That's what I'm saying in Yaoundé. And so on France, these are the important ones that you make. Even Russia, they know this is more than we do. They have embassies in Yaoundé. So what we are telling them is even second-hand information. They are living life. If you look back a few years, some years back, what happened to Gojidinka when he fled from his jail? He went to the British embassy. That's where he sought asylum. So it's not new. He's living in London. He's living in London. It's not because they don't know. No, they know those things. The problem is in diplomacy. Countries establish diplomatic relations for different reasons. The British did not go to Cameroon, so-called Cameroon, to establish an embassy in Yaoundé to fight for Ambazonia. Neither did the Americans. They went there for different reasons. That's why if you go behind the screen, you find them pushing this thing, telling Mr. Paul, we have solved this problem. Again, they know this problem more than we do. The key countries, if, for example, the United States was to take over, you will know that the United States and the United Nations has a team of followers on different countries. Same with Britain. And coincidentally, these main actors, United States, UK, France, these are all permanent members of the United Nations Security Council.
Okay,
So it's not that they don't know.
Speaking of which, he calls this a non-international armed conflict, NIAC. What do you think of that? Because if he's saying it's non-international, he's still insisting, personally, I believe that's like insisting that it is a national crisis. Do you think it is a non-international armed conflict?
Never like that. We have never called this a non-international. In fact, we have taken the pains to write to the International Red Cross, who tried to call this a domestic problem. The thing is, they're speaking like Yaoundé. Yaoundé knows that this is there, but Yaoundé would like it to be called a domestic problem, an internal fight, so they can solve it the way they think. You think Yaoundé doesn't know this, and people in Yaoundé, you think Professor Ngole, Professor Warner, you think they don't know? They know these things. I usually, what they call him, Paul Biya was there in 1961. He knows these things.
So, okay. At that point, thank you so much, Barrister. He says a lot more. He goes on to talk about the fourth point he made. He talked about confirming basic facts in this underreported, and this is what he's saying now, confirming basic facts in this underreported and misrepresented conflict remains difficult, and this plays directly into the hands of the government's strategy and narrative. There have been long talks for an independent fact-finding mission to visit the affected regions that will have to be part of any peace process. Official government statements are often found to be incorrect. Few international journalists get into the region except when embedded with security forces, and domestic journalists face threats, arrests, and physical attacks if their reports challenge the narrative of either the government or the armed groups. Now, the same goes for local human rights activists and investigators who regularly face death threats if they report the details of an atrocity and who likely committed it, without hard facts, including a broad assessment of attitudes and desires of those who live on ground zero. Now, this is a very key part he states here. He says that without hard facts, including a broad assessment of the attitudes and desires of the people who live on ground zero, local and international peacemakers are attempting to paddle upstream in a boat without a paddle, and they might not even have a boat. Okay, so from this, first of all, what do you think about this part where he says the people on ground zero are the most important when it comes to decision making towards freeing homeland or not? Like, I believe what he's saying is they should confirm if the people on the home front want to have independence or not. He says they are the most important when it comes to decision making with the with
They
La
are.
Republic to Cameroon. What do you think about that one?
They are. Because even right now that you and me are talking here, the people who are throwing the stones, who are using the rubber gun, who are having their houses burned, are people in ground zero.
Truly.
But it doesn't mean that in the home front, it doesn't mean that they must be the ones take on the high table and decide. No.
Okay.
Before I go right over there, if this guy has written, take all what he has written and give it 100%. Of that, all he's writing, 100%, 75-80% is in support of what we are doing.
Actually.
So whatever thing he says, he said, like again, we often think that La République is a fool. No. Again, we don't lack good ideas. Let us say what has been done or said up to this point. All of us here are familiar with Christian Toomey. May so rest in peace. This is a man everybody respected. Forget about his wanting to call an Anglophone conference. He put out a document in which part of it says that he had done an internal poll and found that 66% of so-called Anglophones want independence. Christian Toomey was not just a bishop. He was not just any other person. He was not just a cardinal. He was a man with experience in the Francophone world. His career in the church, in the hierarchy of the church, started in Yagua in the extreme north. He was the first bishop of Yagua, the first African bishop of Yagua, 1978, 1979. From there, he came to Douala. These are all Francophone territories. And then he comes out with this. Yeah, they read that thing. They have the document there. So it's not because they did not know. They know it. Take it and put it aside. They created something, the Bilingualism Commission, and put a certain Anglophone called Mosonge there. And this man purported to take a mission to Bamenda and Togo to find out potentially what the Anglophones wanted. He came back and wrote a report. And in his report, he included a lie that they wanted to release the bringing back of the dead body of Ahijo. That was not there. But let us forget about that one. What else did he say? In his report is that the so-called Anglophones all want a federation. That is CPDM. That's former prime minister. That's a man they rely on. He lives in Yaoundé with them. What have they done with that recommendation? In spite of all that, if you mention federation, even in Yaoundé, they'll send you to jail. So it is not because these people don't know. They know what is going on. They know what they did. They just want to silence everybody. It's like somebody taking your wife and tell you to silent, or he will kill you. Or taking your husband, another man taking your husband, taking your children that you have with your husband, and telling you never to come back and give your children food. That is what it is. These guys, it's not that they lack the ideas, they lack the will to implement. Because I'm a Christian. In the Catholic Church will be something called mortal sin. Because what the sins they have committed against us, they are mortal sins. They are mortal sins. But on the contrary, why even in the church who can forgive mortal sins, they think that their sins are not forgivable. So it is not that they lack that. No. We right here, sitting as the IG, do you have anything to regret? No. We have something to encourage us that some other people, this guy writing is not an Ambazonian. He's not even a Cameroonian. We have some other people not who are telling our story. Again, that whole document is 80% in support of what we stand for. Forget about the minor differences that we disagree with. But he's not one of us. He's not writing for us. As I told you from the beginning, someone told me he is an advisor to the CDN. The CDN, we believe, is a sponsor group by Yaoundé. If he's the advisor, He's telling this story. We have just seen it on social media. You tell this document is not in Yaoundé, it is in Yaoundé. If it is
Speaking
only on social media, Atanganji are on social media, they're on WhatsApp. They have this story, they have this document. In fact, it was forwarded to me yesterday from Yaoundé.
Yeah.
It's not that they don't know. Let us start playing the victim. We're not yet victims of ourselves. Forget
Truly.
about what others are doing.
Truly.
They will always be there. And to end, I remember that in 1961, after the maybe so-called joining with Nigeria, there are so many Igbo people in Kumba. Some of them left and went back to Nigeria. Some of them are still there today. They didn't even go. They remain in Kumba till today that I'm talking. So no. This guy is speaking what I think is good. We'll try to correct him where he's wrong. But overall, he's just saying what you and me have been saying in different words. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Barrister team, for that. Now, that's just what you said is just the obvious truth. Many people are out there telling these stories differently. Many people are out there interpreting our story the way they can be comfortable with. And that is why we have to express ourselves the way it has to be. Tell our own stories by ourselves, tell our own part of the story, and tell nothing but the truth. Now, the last one before you go for today. Now, according to Robertas, he says, following models used throughout the history, he says, from Cameroon's hidden war in 1950s to 1960s to South Africa as late as the early 1990s, the Cameroon government uses third force tactics and other divide and rule manipulations to discredit Ambazonian opposition. He says this reality seems to be ignored by diplomats and international organization representatives who should know better. But the government and its security forces directly employs third force strategies to show confusion among amber fighters. Now he says they employ third force strategies to sow confusion among amber fighters, local civilian population, and the international communities. Now, that can also be explained why some persons in the international community can say that with the number of those that has been displaced, with the number of houses and properties lost so far in this senseless war, people outside the African shore would say that it is mere communal crisis. Now, these strategies, according to Robert, says include covert operations as well as an intensive disinformation campaign, given the decentralized nature of the armed struggle across the two regions. It is not always clear who is giving the order for this attack or that kidnapping. That is his point. He's saying it is not clear, but we know, right? We know who gives the order. But let's go on to analyze. It says, over the last few years, coincidentally, at those brief moments when there seems to be growing international community attention, now will among external stakeholders. The government also arms, funds, incites, and then protects from prosecution a few local leaders, including chiefs, in addition, inflames pre-existing local conflicts between communities such as the Muslim, Bororos, pastoralists, and Christian farmers in the Northwest region. What do you have to say about this?
I think
I think we'll
it's
try to
very on
summarize
the
all of it in this your
yes,
remarks, sir.
he's very much on point. You see, it appears for a very long time we did not understand our opponents. First, they are not just deceitful, they are an organized government built on falsehood and fraud. That's the fact. When the Frenchers and the Indians and so on were talking about two equal status or whatever nonsense, still with equal status, they did not realize this guy was deceiving them. They didn't read between the lines. From that very day one, there was never anything called equal but separate status. Never. Let us just go back to the 1961 August meeting in Fumba. Who were the conveners? Ayujo was the chairman. He closed it when he wished. He made the agenda. He did not ring a bell to Frontier and the rest. There was no, we were not even part of it, part of the country. But he could call a meeting, bring in Foncha and his team, and silence them and say, okay, this is the point, I'm closing the meeting. There was no equality there. It had never been equality there. And then we are joining a system that is built on corruption and fraud. They will buy you. I've always said this. If they don't have their way, by buying you, they have only two ways. They either buy you with money or they eliminate you physically. That has been done, even to our people. And they have strategies to do it. Let me just take it back to the villages where they are. If you are a village chief, for example, I disagree with Paul Biya or at the best, disagree with the CPDM, they will overthrow you and put the own chief that they want. That's what they did to the Bamil case. They overthrew the chiefs. For Kechang and others, they overthrew them because they did not agree with them. So these tactics are not new. There in Cameroon, if you are not a very big supporter of the regime, if you're a policeman, for example, or gendarme, whatever they call it, they will not send you to Boya. They will not do that. They will not send you to Bamanda. So it's their trade that they are doing, that their arm that they have. They have been doing that all their lives. They use the money to abuse you, to do whatever thing. There's nothing like equal in status that they ever had in their mind. Their only idea was to dominate and eventually assimilate us. That is a fact, can be analyzed. But our people didn't read this. Again, I mentioned people like Goji Dinka here a few minutes ago. What were they chasing them for? Trying to catch and looking for just giving a different idea from what they have? What did Wilbur do other than speaking in parliament? So they used all that thing to subdue you, to make you believe or act the way they want. It's a method that has been used. It was used by the French for so many years. They still use it everywhere. That's why you find the house of cards breaking down in Africa, falling apart. When people go to different schools, most of the people, for example, in F.ASCE, in Chad, they have come to study in the United States. They're not limited to France. They've studied in Britain. And the eyes are now open. Oh, this is how the world is. So what the guy has said is true. Unfortunately for Yaoundé, the people who are actually managing this struggle at the front now, at least the directives, they are you and me who have nothing to learn from them going to school. We have nothing to learn from them. We live in better democratic countries. We can tell them that this is not what is happening in the United States. This is not what is happening in England. This is not what is happening even in Russia. We can do that. And so that's where their problem is. That's why they want even these so-called negotiators. They don't want to negotiate with us. They want to negotiate with these people in ground zero, the home front. How many people who studied in the United States, in the United Kingdom, are back in the home front, who are not working for the administration, who can be found to be mayor of Nkambe, mayor of Manfred? No, they are the own type of people that they want to talk to. And so they don't, that is exactly what they are doing. That's their greatest problem. And again, to what that guy said, the best thing that we ever had in this struggle, which is now in this war, is a decentralized fighting that we have developed. If that thing were not decentralized, let me say 2 years ago, if based on the fighting capacity of Field Marshal, the king of the BLM, who had met him the whole overall commander of the Ambazonian fighting force, and today is no longer there, that would have been the end of the thing. But as long as he was the Field Marshal, the king, he was for the BLM alone. There was another one in Kambe, there was another one in Wum, there was another one in Manfred. So even if he is dead, or they are no longer fighting there, Manfred is still active, Kumba is still active, other places are still active. That's the best that we could do. They can go and kill one, and they have been killing, but that will not end the war because of this decentralized command structure that we have. We're not like them. If they can deploy Captain ABC in Wum or Captain BCD in Manfred or Kumba or Victoria, they can withdraw him to Yaoundé. We don't have a central place where we withdraw our people there, which is to our advantage. If they knew where our children were, they will come and bribe them. 10 million. 10 million is a big sum of money to poor people. There's no money for government. They can go and take a way back loan for that. The money the loan they took from China to buy junk computers and give to students. It's 10 times more than what they used to bribe our boys. So that is the advantage we have. Again,
Truly.
what this guy has written is an eye opener to us. Again, I'm very sure these people in Yaoundé, even at the highest level of their own planning, they have that document with them. Let them challenge it or let them implement it. Everything they said there is good for us, with modifications in some parts, but it's overall good.
Thank you so much, Barrister team. Nice one there. Thank you so much, Barrister Thing. We really needed somebody like you with this in-depth knowledge of Ambazonia and law and all that we need to know here in the studio tonight. Thank you so much for that wonderful elaboration and contribution to this Undaunted newsroom tonight. Well, in a few minutes, we'll be transitioning to the office of the Secretary of State for Communications and IT, as today is the State of the Liberations Movement with Dr. Martin Mungwa.
All right, fellow Ambazonians, before we make that transition, this is just a gentle reminder that on Thursday, we will be having an exclusive interview with the president. Of course, we have just one president, President Dr. Samuel Ikomesako. We will have an exclusive interview with him. You'll be allowed to call in and join the conversation. It's by 8 p.m. Amber time on Thursday, 20th of October, 2022. And he will be speaking on recognition. If there is no Ambazonia, there shall be no La Republic du Cameroon. So I'm sure that you do not want to miss this State House address by the President of the Federal Republic of Ambazonia. And this is, we here wrapping up the Undaunted News tonight, but we are not yet done until we have their Secretary of State for Communications and IT and also Lady Casey in the studio.
Let me just add this point before I leave. Let me just make this last point, because we've heard this thing so many times of how divided we are. People, they have so many Ambazonian groups. That is a fact, but that should not be the worry of Yaoundé. They don't have to determine who is their enemy. If we're going to the conference table, to the negotiation table now, they are divided because they have at least 300 political parties over there. Okay. We're not going to tell them what parties to put in their delegation. And ours is not new. All struggles that I know, and I think it's factual, have also diverse groups. Zimbabwe is a case in point that all of us can remember. In Zimbabwe, they're all fighting apartheid, but there's so many different groups. Ndibanangi Sitole, Bishop Ebe Mozorowa, all these were groups fighting apartheid. They were not even sleeping on the same bed. And when the time came, they had to go to London, to Lancashire talks to negotiate the end of apartheid. They were all there. Even there, they did not agree. Mugabe, who eventually led the whole thing, went there under the political party called ZANU. That was his own group. Even ZANU did not agree there. ZANU broke off right there in London, in Lancashire. They broke off, and that's why Mugabe formed his own group called ZANU PF, Patriotic Front. That did not stop apartheid from ending. So this nonsense of Anglophones are so many in groups, that is not their problem. Let them agree to go to the negotiations. They are not the ones to choose the party who will negotiate with them. If I understand the thing very, very well, it is a facilitator who identifies the party, the groups to come in. And whoever group they come there will assure that the IG will be there. The strength of a party in those talks, will be measured by their participation, by their contribution, by the quality of what they say. And so that should not be a worry to all of us. The IG cannot say, well, you will not be there. You are Panga, you will not be there. We don't have the power to do that. But we'll go there. We'll be there in our own right.
All right.
It's not the problem of Yaoundé to determine what is Mr. Choyaba, where it is President Sako, where it is you or me to go there. That is not their issue.
Okay.
They should shut up, constitute their own delegation, honestly, and meet us at the talks. When they come to the talk, if they met only you sitting there as the leader of the ambassador delegation, that's not their problem. They meet you. They meet enemy. They meet a woman. They meet a man. They meet a dog. They meet a cat. They will negotiate with that cat, with that animal that they meet there. That's all. Because the animal sitting there, the cat, the woman, the man, it's not just that person. It's an embody of something that has been imbued in him or her. He has ideas that come from others, and he will be talking for all of us. So the idea that there are so many Anglophone groups, they will never cease to be many Anglophone groups. There will always be many. But the talks will show who is who. That's all about it. So thank you very much for having me.
All right,
I
thank you
hope
so
people have
much
learned
for
something from
yes,
I
thank
think
you so
something
much,
hope
Barrister.
somebody has learned something from my participation.
Obviously. We're so elated to have you as well. Thank you so much, Barrister Ambassador. We would have had more of you tonight, but we have Dr. Mungwa already at the other studio waiting to come up for the State of Liberation Movement. So we're sure we can have you some other time. It's always a pleasure having you here. All right, Ambazonians,
Thank
of
you.
course, you've heard his reaction, and I'm sure that you have your own opinion. This is the reason why you must always tell your story yourself, because you alone can tell it the way the world needs to hear. All right, at this point, we need to transition into the office of the Secretary of State for Communications and IT to bring you the State of Revelation.
We the people, ABC Amber TV, Ambazonia Broadcasting Corporation. The voice of the voiceless, the voice of Ambazonia, connecting the world from Africa. With untold stories, Africa's best.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening, fellow Ambazonians. Welcome to the State of the Liberation Movement with Dr. Martin Mungwa, the Secretary of State for Communication and IT. And before I go on to welcome the Secretary for Communication and IT, I would like to thank the Undaunted Girl, Star Smart, and Onye Opala for a wonderful show and the in-depth explanations and detailed chronology of the revolution of the French Cameroon schemes and schisms to distract us from our liberation by Barrister Tim Bessa. Barrister Tim, thank you for that great insight and that detailed explanation and analysis of some aspects of events of our history and the attitudes and games of La République du Cameroon. Now we would welcome our Secretary of State for Communication and IT to give us the IG positions of some current events and the policy of the interim government as we continue to fight for our freedom and for the liberation of Ambazonia, Southern Cameroons. Dr. Martin Mungwa, you are welcome to the show today.
You're watching the People's Television, ABC Amber TV, the voice of Ambazonia. Stay tuned.
Hello, global greetings to all Ambazonians. First, I would like to make this important announcement. I understand that the anchor ladies did make it a while ago. You all know that the President of the Federal Republic of Ambazonia, President Samuel Ekomisako, will be giving an interview on ABC on Thursday, the 20th of October at 8 o'clock. So just make sure you mark that down in your calendars because it's going to be a very, very important interview. I would also like to remind Ambazonians that this weekend we have the federal territory draft. So it's a very important draft for federal territory, Fako County. So I hope you all prepare to be an active part of this draft. Dear Ambazonians and the international community, Today, I'm going to talk about recognition with or without dialogue. I understand that it's a little tweak from what was actually announced or advertised earlier. Not independence, but recognition with or without dialogue. And first, 21 gun salute to our valiant forces, the Ambazonian Restoration Force. Right. So last week, your interim government learned that La République du Cameroon was holding a meeting in Canada involving some individuals from La République du Cameroon, some Anglophone federalists and Ambazonian actors. This event, it must be recalled, came in the wake of La République du Cameroon terminating the Swiss-facilitated mediation process. This termination by La République du Cameroon prompted Switzerland to pull out as the mediator between Ambazonia and La République du Cameroon. It must be remembered that the Swiss facilitated mediation process came about in 2019 and was endorsed by the United Nations, the African Union, and the European Union, except France. It has come very clear that the French Cameroon, a proxy of France that has occupied Ambazonia since the 1st of October 1961, has only one policy. That policy, in the words of political science professor Chris Roberts at the University of Calgary in Canada, is driven by a hammer and lie strategy. This is how Cameroon operates the strategy on three elements. One, keep up the military pressure on Ambazonians, even if that means more Amba civilians killed or displaced. Two, discredit Ambazonian nationalists as separatists and terrorists at every opportunity within the non-transparent or opaque information environment. And three, try hard to convince the international community that cosmetic political fixes have real substance. As the political science professor concluded, the Paul Biya regime is struggling to maintain itself in power alongside continued blistering violence, misery, and long-term instability in the Gulf of Guinea. The Paul Biya regime, in a nutshell, has no pathway to either victory or peace in the Gulf of Guinea. Dear Ambazonians, yes, let me repeat, the United Nations voted federation between the former British Southern Cameroons and La République du Cameroon has failed. The outcome of that war is there for all to see. The Cameroon's federations failed for two fundamental reasons. Firstly, unknown to the United Nations General Assembly in April 1961, the leaders of La République du Cameroon had already surrendered the sovereignty of their country to the former colonial power France in a cooperation treaty executed on December 26, 1959 between Presidents Amadou Ahidjo and Charles de Gaulle. The said treaty is in essence a re-colonization pact of Cameroon by France. However, in April 1961, France and Cameroon concealed the secret pact and insincerity, which led to a miscarriage of justice on the independence of Southern Cameroons immediately after a proposal to merge La République du Cameroon and Southern Cameroon's peoples had been rejected at the United Nations General Assembly. This information is reported in proceedings of the 995th United Nations General Assembly held on the 21st of April 1961. Secondly, the government of Cameroon merely administers the country on high instructions from Paris, or dare I say, the French presidency. As a people with a colonial heritage bearing on the last colonial power, Great Britain, the international personality of Ambazonia is being deleted, our resources exploited, and revenues expropriated by France and Cameroon. We have been subjected to what a French newspaper categorized in January 2017 as cultural annihilation in policies originating from the presidency of La République du Cameroon in Yaoundé, starting in 1972 to date under Mrs. Amadou Ahidjo and Paul Biya. There is in fact no irony in Mr. Biya's admission in Paris in 2019 that the French-dominated government of Cameroon has attempted to assimilate the English-speaking people of Southern Cameroons without any consent into the Francophonie or Francophone culture, but failed because of identity differences. The brutality, killings, mass graves, destruction of human habitat, and desecration of the dead in the Southern Cameroons by the armed forces of Cameroon over 61 years is well recorded. Following the departure of La République du Cameroon from the failed Cameroon Federation in January 1984, the people of Southern Cameroon also departed from the failed Cameroon Federation of 1st October 2017. However, La République du Cameroon, aided and abetted by France, has maintained an army and administration of occupation in our country, which we now call Ambazonia. Let it be known by the government in Yaoundé that running away from a mediated solution will not shield La République du Cameroon from the facts of the matter. La République du Cameroon can never accomplish an annexation which has denied her at the was denied her at the United Nations General Assembly by votes and fiercely resisted at home by the indigenous people. Fellow Ambazonians, on matters of war and peace, let me talk a bit about the lack of wisdom and foresight of Yaoundé. No group of people is more experienced than the 100 members of the United States Senate. These men and women of valor worked on their own for more than a year, studying the root causes of our problem and the colonial impact of the old world, I mean Europe, in our part of the world. They concluded in what we now know as the bipartisan U.S. Senate Resolution 684. This resolution was issued on La République's Independence Day in 2021. However, La République du Cameroon under Paul Biya is making her usual runs to alternatives calculated to evade common sense and wise counsel. We all remember this tactic of Mr. Biya not so long ago when asked by the Commonwealth of Nations in the last century to implement good governance principles and commitments by heads of state through an independent electoral commission, Mr. Biya first made a trip to an election observatory near his presidential office. Under pressure at home and abroad, he climbed out of the observatory and ended up in Eleka, which his government and political party has control. We are now 22 years old in a new century, and that failed Federation of Cameroon still has no independent electoral commission. This time around, the world has had enough of the French pampa dictator and assimilationist of Southern Cameroon's people. We urge all Ambazonians not to lose focus. This interim government, led by Dr. Samuel Komisako, will not tolerate Mr. Biya's effort to switch from unconditional talks with mediators present to a form of observatory where others will come to observe the old dance of Mr. Biya, teleguided by France. We, the people of Southern Cameroon, Ambazonia, have that duty and right to self-determination. By virtue of this right, we, the Amazonian people, are entitled under international law to freely determine our political status and freely pursue our economic, social, and cultural development in our sovereign Amazonian nation state. It has therefore become incumbent on Ambazonians to resolutely demand international recognition of the sovereign statehood of Ambazonia. To Cameroon, we say, we shall never retreat, we shall never surrender. Thank you. Long live the Federal Republic of Ambazonia. Short live the revolution. Over to you, Casey.
You're watching the People's Television, ABC Amber TV, the voice of Ambazonia. Stay tuned.
Wow, wow, wow. Thank you. That is a brilliant piece. Fellow Amazonia, I hope you listen to every word by the Secretary of State for Communication, IT, Dr. Mungwa. Every word in that piece was hitting the point. You touch on all aspects of current affairs of our struggle, and that is simply amazing. And Ambazonians, there's so much to learn. We learn every day in this struggle. We learn every day how to prosecute our revolution. We learn every day how the enemy operates. And Dr. Martin have just crowned his presentation this evening what Barrister Tim was saying. He has just put it in an interim government perspective, and that is simply amazing. While we will be waiting for your calls, hope the technicians will put the number on the screen, okay? And we'll take your calls. You can ask your questions based on what the Secretary of State for Communication have just presented, or you can ask your question, anything regarding IG position and IG perspective or activities in the current happenings within our struggle. And just like Dr. Mungwa mentioned, the president will be out to answer your questions, to talk to you all, fellow Ambazonians and Ambazonian well-wishers across the globe on Thursday. You don't want to miss it, because this is the hour of our struggle where we need to have a conversation to revitalize and refocus, because the enemy, La Republique, is pulling out all his old tricks, as we already know. That has been well articulated earlier today by Barrister Tim and well articulated by Dr. Mungwa. While we wait for our callers to start calling in, I just want to ask one question, Dr. Mungwa, from your presentation. You mentioned about the when the interim government learned about the Canadian, I don't even know what to call it, the Canadian gathering of people of interest in such thing, and you mentioned when the interim government learned about it, and you mentioned why the interim government. Now, just to put it in simple terms so that our people to fully understand, why exactly did the interim government not take part in the Canadian meeting? Was the interim government invited? And if they were invited, why did the interim government not attend?
Thank you. That's a very important question for clarification's sake. I think we were aware through President Sarkozy's speech on the 1st of October that there has been some, I don't know, communication between, I think, the Canadian ambassador to Yaoundé, Ambassador Bale, to between him and Dr. Sako, trying to encourage him to attend a meeting that had no purpose, that had no agenda, that had there was in fact no information as to the nature of that meeting. And remember that whenever you have a situation where people are calling you in a very secret manner, I'm trying to push you to do something that is definitely against the will of the people. I can show you that President Sako is one of those who can pick it from the first word that comes out of your mouth. Remember, La République du Cameroon is very used to secret talks. This is not the first time they're actually suffocating under the secret talks of 1959, December 26th, when they signed their birthright to France. And that's all they've known for 61 years. That in order to do business with somebody and suffocate that person, you have to organize a secret talk. And this, I thought, the Swiss-led process was an occasion for La République to throw out France out of the window and regain their true independence. No, they have been choked, held under the secret talks of 1959, and they think that they are just so smart to take Ambazonia with them. So it was very easy for Dr. Sako to recognize that whenever somebody is trying to contact you for so-called secret talks, those talks are definitely not in your favor. There is one piece of information that Barrister Tim made when he showed up a while ago. He said those who will be the ultimate beneficiary of whatever negotiations we have are the people in Ambazonia, are the Ambazonians. That is very clear. And we have made it very clear on this platform that the role of the interim government is to make sure that Ambazonia is free. that no matter what happens, it is the opinion, the aspirations of the Ambazonian people that will take forward. So Sako has no right whatsoever to go to a pre-arranged meeting, especially a secret meeting, to talk about Ambazonia. The moment Dr. Sako steps into that meeting, he is no longer the leader of the Ambazonian people. Somebody will take over. And Dr. Sako knows this very well. So when he was approached to take part in this so-called secret meeting, and quite interestingly, the caller made sure that he should keep it secret. And that just blew his mind. So what, keep this secret? Of whose interest is it? So whoever is in Canada, whether they have started or they have completed that meeting, that charade, it is something that they will execute on themselves. And whatever decisions they arrive at will have no bearing, and I repeat, no bearing on the people of Ambazonia. And that's why the interim government, and we keep repeating, we have no interest in secret meetings. We shall never retreat. We shall never surrender.
Wow.
We make sure that we execute the aspirations of the Ambazonian people. And I stand here to say it once again to the Ambazonian people. We shall never have a secret meeting with Yaoundé. Come 1,000 years. We must go to a meeting with mediators with all the conditions that every mediation process requires. So we'll have an agenda, and at the end of every day, we'll have to give a report to the Ambazonian people so they know exactly which direction we're taking. This is no time for joke. And I'm happy that some Ambazonian leaders, they're beginning to understand the importance of having a unified voice in this direction. Over to you.
Wow, thank you very much for that, staying and firm. And for every patriotic Ambazonian, I hope the message is clear that we will no longer, we cannot be deceived again in this day and age for this never again generation. We will never be deceived like they did in the Fumban, and there's so many incidents that have been listed this evening on ABC Amber TV by our anchor ladies and Barrister team, and currently our Secretary of State for Communication, because we need to watch and listen and understand the circumstances of the Ambazonian child, of Ambazonia as a nation in the eyes of La Republique, because La Republique has taken us for granted, has taken us for fool for far too long, and this never again generation is determined through their interim government headed by President Samuel Sako Ikome that this time around, that we are not going to give up, we are not going to back down, we are not going to we are not going to chicken out, and we're not going to be deceived by any packaged, organized talks or private talks, just like the private talks they organize in NERA, and we know the rest of the story where our NERA leaders are, our leaders of then are now. That was one of the private talks that was organized by La Republique, and what happened to our leaders till they, how many years now in jail, in their dungeons. So we can no longer tolerate that. We should learn. We should learn, because one of the things I found out about Ambazonians is we don't learn from events and incidents that happen within our revolution. If we learn our lessons, there are so many things we will not repeat. This is not a time where we go to La Republique for any conversations without a mediator. Without a
Can I just
mediator, and a mediator.
yes, let me add some more points. You made something very important. There have been a few striking periods in history that has actually exposed the how do I put it? The greed and the wickedness of La République du Cameroon. Whether you start in 1961 with the Fumban Conference, where Mr. Foncha was duped into having this so-called bilateral meeting with Ahidjo, that led to the foundation of the problems that we all encounter today. We remember in the recent past the so-called invitation to Nigeria by La République of Cameroon in the guise of discussing and negotiating with Sisiko Ayub Tabe And what happened to him? The same Sisiko Ayub Tabe who was bundled and sent to Yaoundé is the person behind La République for these talks. Can you imagine that in a democratic system, you are taking prisoners, still prisoners, to go and negotiate with them? How can prisoners negotiate freely? And you can see why. Even during the so-called this these talks in Canada, you still have La République actually accentuating the fight, the killing of Amazonians. And you think that these people are honest? This is a band of thieves and crooks who are ruling a country. These are bandits. Anybody who would like to go in a so-called back door or some beer parlor or some I don't know, hostel or hotel in Canada to negotiate, they are doing that at their own risk, because Ambazonia will never listen to these sellouts. How can you imagine that up to today we don't even know the number of people who are taking part in these so-called secret talks? What is the agenda of the secret talks? We don't know. We've got snippets here and there as to what was the center on the agenda. Is that how you negotiate with the people in a democratic system? These are people who are afraid of democracy because they know even in kindergarten, none of those people can be elected to any position. In kindergarten, I can tell you this. Just the mere sight of them will frighten children. These are all monsters with beer at the head of it. And I want Ambazonians to know this. The same people he has sent to Canada, these people, he's ready to kill them if they don't deliver what they want.
Yeah.
This same beer, he will kill all of them, including Diongute. If they step out of line, they are dead people. That is the beer regime for you. And that's why they only negotiate through the barrel of a gun. We shall never retreat. We shall never surrender. I hope they get this. Over to you, Casey.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that emphasis. And the telephone number is on. You can call in and make your contribution or ask your questions. The lines are open, and we are going to take calls for a short period today because the Secretary of State for Communication has really detailedly articulate the interim government position, and it's up to you. If you were listening, if you need clarification, you can call in and ask your question. And if you also want to know more of what the interim government is up to, is you to call. And also, I would add and repeat again, this Saturday is the Federal Capital City with territory is having the draft, and all Amazonians is expected to draft for the Federal Capital Territory, Fako County, this Saturday. So we are all expected to be there, participate, and make your draft for Fako County, because we must take our territory and we must liberate Amazonia. Like Dr. Mungwa said, there is no turning back. Dr. Mungwa have emphasized that we will never give up, we will never surrender until Amazonia is liberated. And that's the mindset for every patriotic Amazonia and everybody from Southern Cameroon's origin from Southern Cameroon, because there is nowhere else. There is nowhere else you can go to. La Republic will never value nor appreciate you. Like Dr. Martin said, when La Republic uses you, it dumps you. We don't want to start listing. You know what has happened to all the DDR, all the guys from DDR. You know what has happened to every promises. You know what happened to the national bad luck in the name of court dialogue. You know the results, all the promises they have made from our cries, from what we have all our requests to be respected as human beings. And every time we remind you that La Republic have no regard, no respect for the Ambazonia of Southern Cameroonians. And yes, And we have Paddy who is just joined us. But before I give the floor to Paddy to speak, I would just like to remind all Amazonians that we are not divided. Dr. Martin mentioned that we are not divided at all. Division is not an excuse for not fighting for your liberation. There is so much to do within this Amazonian liberation struggle, and drafting for Fako County this Saturday is one of them. And now we would officially welcome Tao Paddy King to the program. And Tao Paddy King, you are welcome to this program. The floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Mungwa. I've been following up. For those of you watching me, perhaps you might also see below my eyes that I'm sleepy. But then I just thought, okay, what about our brothers and sisters that are in the bushes and the voices in the bushes that go for days running? We just had a report what happened in Bali yesterday, and it's happening everywhere. At the same time, Cameroon is in Canada pretending to have a dialogue, mostly with enablers and not with the stakeholders of the Amazonian struggle. Thank you, Dr. Mungwa. I've heard, I also followed the report of the Undaunted, but if you would permit Lady Casey and Dr. Mungwa, perhaps we have to take on some details of reports coming in from Canada already, and the captions coming in from their news headlines to explain to Ambazonians exactly why the interim government, Dr. Mungo, I'm sure you would have seen this paper because it was dropped in a platform that we're there together. It will explain exactly why the interim government boycotted such talks. There are lots of reasons. You have the Guardian Post. We all know the Guardian Post and what they're capable of doing, how they do whatever they do. Guardian Post captions, Canada fronts internationally supervised, take note of the word, internationally supervised referendum to end Anglophone crisis. This is not ignorant. The chief editor in this newspaper understands language. Is very conscious, and this is a pro-Yaoundé newspaper, and they do not use idle words. This same newspaper consciously, or I would say calculatedly, published last week that the Sako-led interim government is presenting preconditions to participate. No, you've heard from Dr. Mungwa here that the president was disinclined to the idea after having been contacted by the Canadian ambassador. So it's technical, Dr. Mungwa. I think perhaps you would want us to talk on internationally supervised, the technicalities involved in that statement, and the word referendum. Is that what we want? Because before I make a contribution, I'd like you, the Secretary of State, to talk to us, please.
Yeah, thank you, Paddy, and thank you for bringing such details. First of all, Dr. Sako never presented any preconditions. Our position was exactly the Swiss-led process. That was the process that the international community endorsed, and we were going to go by those standards because the standards of the Swiss-led process are international and accepted all over the world. So talking about some preconditions to some sort of backdoor negotiation is totally out of line. It's inconsistent with the position of the interim government. And with the case of referendum, I think we have made it very clear that we want recognition with or without dialogue. Now, but one thing is clear. I can understand the position normally of the United Nations that in order to, whenever you have of arguments of this nature, the United Nations would normally, they would like to have a referendum in order to make a clear-cut decision in the end. But we are not there yet. We are not there yet. We believe that we were actually given independence. We had independence in 1961, and on the basis of the vote at the United Nations, we are an independent people. So we believe that, as on the basis of that fact, we should have automatic recognition. Our case is a little bit unique from many parts of the world. Okay, when you have like the case of South Sudan or other parts of the world where they had to go to a referendum in order to make a clear demarcation. Take the case of New Caledonia in France, where it was a matter of independence or staying with France. That was an issue where the country was it was a one country, but they wanted to determine whether they want to split from the motherland or from the colonial power, and therefore they wanted a referendum. In our case, we already have independence. So I would believe that even considering referendum would just be an alternative that will be decided at a later time. But we have the right for instant recognition, and that is what we are fighting for. I hope I've made this very clear. There are many options that people may look into, but our condition is very unique in the case that we have independence, and that independence should be followed as was given to us in 1961. Over to you, Paddy.
Thank you very much. Fellow Ambazonians, ladies and gentlemen, the phone lines are open. You'll have to call to share your emotions. Some of you would have read the reports that are coming in there as written by George W. something. I'm going to go through it. I'm sure you are vexed as well as I am vexed because of the paradox encapsulated in the article. And I try to see the purpose of it. Barrister Tim would want to argue that he's talking in our favor. But then in law also there's such a thing as trying to talk from both sides, but drifting towards a particular direction, which is where we're gonna get into. Thank God, Dr. Mungwa has.
Paddy, let me add one more thing. Paddy, let me add one more thing. Sorry, I think I'm missing out the international nature of it. Look, talking about international, what does international mean? It simply means that you have people from maybe different parts of the world. It is a very subjective adjective. Is international observers. It's very subjective. So I don't think I'm going to put any more importance to it than than what it is. Is that's what it is. Period. So you definitely probably have Canadians in the room. They may come in as so-called UN or whatever organization, and they're again just observers. They can't make any change to the agenda. So that is totally immaterial. What is of material to us is whether aid was a meeting with a mediator with all the attributes of a mediator. That is what catches international attention. And it falls behind all the descriptions that we've given in the past when it comes to mediation. So the whole idea about international, you can bring in a monkey from Switzerland to be part of it. You can bring a baboon from Australia. Yeah, you make it international, but it doesn't make sense. It doesn't change anything, okay, to the value or to the authenticity of the meeting. And besides, what is on the agenda? Those who are talking about so-called international meeting in Canada, have they provided the agenda? Have they posted the agenda? Signed by who? Who are the participants? I won't be surprised that it may be a group of 10 people, 8 Francophones, and 2 Anglophones coming to decide on the future of Ambazonia. And trust me, La République is very good at doing things like that. They will send out a CPDM party candidate to go and interview other CPDM militants and then come back and write a report and smear everybody with it. Look, when are we going to be intelligent, to be able to read the minds of La République? These are never people who ever believed in a fair game. Never in their lives. Because if it was a matter of fair game and fair play, none of these people will be even in charge of a chicken house, because they are all thieves. You can't trust them with your chicken, let alone a government. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mungwa. Lady Casey will be taking the calls. Fellow Ambazonians, as you can see on the screen, you'll be calling the UK number there, +44 7506 403355. We will be taking some of your calls. The Secretary of State for Communications and IT is here to handle this. But first, we want to decode some of these words that are being used, the objectives behind them. He is internationally supervised. Dr. Mungwa has touched on the surface of that word referendum, and then we have heard Barrister Tim earlier on actually saying it's a consensus. A referendum is a consensus, but I think that it is deeper, slightly deeper than that. Because if it was just a consensus, the opinion, what took place in 1961, the first question we should be asking is, what took place in 1961? So you realize that this is a fraudulent activity and we are pushing hard. There's some good news, Nate, that we're fighting and fighting really very strong. And Cameroon is confused, grappling everywhere, trying to get, they don't want to do the real thing. First of all, through John Saw told us that the Canada conference was a damage control. We now seen it was a damage control because how desperate were they to rush into a conference? The necessary questions like Dr. Mungwa is asking, nobody has answered. Number one, what was the agenda? Number two, who are the organizers? And then now they are pushing into the public for those who perhaps might be short-sighted and do not understand the intricacies involved to start thinking that something good can come in it. Dr. Mungwa, with your permission, you are going to react on this very clearly, but perhaps I should bring it, amplify it. I have this document here. It was sent to me by Barrister Timby Hilsa. And it's important that this is what is coming out from Canada. Just get it very closely. I've gone through it a couple of times, and that's why we had it in the news this evening. And now listen to very closely. They said, pathways to peace in Cameroon. You must understand, like, terminologies are still very wrong, because when we get into real negotiations, the right words are going to be employed. Now, so 10 critical observations. Now, he is purporting himself as a critical thinker. He says 10 critical observations for the international community. And as a critical thinker, he made some statements that are quite misleading. Now, he is so-called Chris W.J. Roberts. I think he's an agent that most probably Cameroon can pay anybody to pursue an agenda. Now, the first thought of him could sound romantic to every independentist. Number one, he says the best permanent solution to the Anglophone crisis, I have a very big problem with that word, would be a transparent, inclusive, negotiated peace process leading to a free and fair, internationally supervised referendum. Okay, after saying something, he brings a referendum that included a clear question or institutional arrangement. Are we talking about institutions? Now you get it. It is right to talk about a referendum when you're talking about a or institutional arrangement or government restructure or reconstruction of a system. You can talk about a referendum. But we are talking about including independence. It's a paradox. You can't put all of that in context. Independence of no trusteeship territory went through a referendum. Dr. Mungwa, perhaps you want to talk before I get to point two. Which
Thank you.
country? We had the referendum in Barbados sometime last year. Barbados was kicking out the Queen and saying the Queen is no longer the head of state of Barbados. That was a referendum. But for the independence, do we need a referendum for the people who have been voted free by the UN General Assembly?
Thank you. You've just hit the nail on the head, because that's exactly what I was trying to say earlier. And I mean, the way that gentleman actually presented his case is as if it's a foregone conclusion. That's what we are going to bring to the table. They have not listened to our part of the story. They have not listened to our arguments. And now they're already drawing conclusion that at the end, we're going to go to a referendum. Referendum based on what? That is a very good question. How can an independent country be going to a referendum? Look, the only reason I thought a referendum will make sense is after we have our independence, and then we decide to ask Ambazonians, do we want to have any sort of treaty of any nature or work with a foreign country that something like that. It can be a referendum whether Ambazonians want it or not. But as far as our recognition is concerned, I do not see the role of a referendum. I do not see the role of a referendum for what? When you put such a language in a referendum, you put it to people who are already independent to decide on one thing or the other. It is all left to us whether our people will decide to do, maybe to have any sort of, I don't know, economic activity or whatever with our neighboring country. But not in the case of sovereignty. We are an independent people already. Why they bring a referendum to us?
And I think, Dr. Mungwa, that's what is that's why
way of trying to reconstitute another La République du Cameroon by putting in that word referendum, because that's the catchphrase that people would look at. Oh, we want to go to a referendum, but you realize it will be the same thing that we had. Independence by joining this or this, or referendum not on independence but on this. Or I mean, they'll make it so convoluted that at the end of the day, we'll be the ones to lose. We cannot accept anything short of recognition with or without dialogue. The basis of our dialogue is on independence. We have enough documentation. We have enough proof. We have enough backup material that we are independent. Let them prove to us that any of the facts are wrong, so that they can put it on a referendum for us to argue upon. All the facts we are putting on the table support the fact that we are an independent people already. So why bring referendum? For what? Doesn't make sense.
Thank you. Ampadi, before you come in, I just want to say that I just wanted to say that talk of referendum at this point in time is a total distraction. And La Republique have his international partners when he's trying to please that he's doing something about killing our people and all the atrocities they have caused in our land. Now, and they will pay any cronies, anybody to write whatever they want. And we've seen how the newspapers are home front, how they have been flip-flopping about the events on ground. So we cannot be distracted by play of words at this point in time. As far as Ambazonia liberation is concerned, no one would use English to confuse us. We went to school in English. We learn all our lives in English. So no matter what the situation is, we understand that there is La Republique propaganda and manipulation that did not start today. And if anybody is buying into that, it's just total hypocrisy and that have refused to face the facts. And we also need to not be blind to the facts of the world, that the powers that be play by a different set of rules. They are not naive. They don't jump into anything without guarantees for them, or without a guarantee outcome. So as far as Ambazonians are concerned, anybody can gather whoever they want to gather anywhere. Anybody can convene whatever they want to convene anywhere. But our restoration and our independence is the only motivation for any dialogue, for any negotiations, for any mediation. We are going there with a mindset to have our freedom and our liberation. So us focusing on things like that, where most of our people who are affected and those fighting, it's not going to put us in a position where we need to muster and train our minds to focus on absolutes.
Yes, one thing here, I think a little bit of an insult from this professor is the fact that
thank you,
he is trying to replace Resolution 684 with his own 10-point on how to bring peace. Didn't he read Resolution 684 from the U.S. Senate? Resolution 684 make it very clear the fundamental issue to look into is meeting without conditions. That is very important. I don't see how you are going to push away Resolution 684 and then go to talk about some professor of whatever. I don't, fine, he's a professor, he's doing his job at the university, but we are talking about people who are in contact with the problems of people on the ground. We're talking about senators in the U.S. Senate who are in contact with problems all over the world, in America, in Africa, Europe, and elsewhere.
Sorry, Dr. Mungwa, we have a first caller on the line. I'm just going to put you through. Yeah, you're now live on ABC Amber TV. Which county are you calling from, and what's your question or contribution? Oh, okay, they dropped. I'm not sure if it's network or if that they dropped. Sorry, Dr. Mungwa, you can continue.
Yes, so I said that you cannot put aside the resolution 684 in favor of what a professor at the university is trying to write about. I mean, you are talking about senators who have been politicians, who have been in the political game for the past 20, 30, 40 years, who understand what people have been going through, who have been there trying to solve practical problems on the ground. You ignore that to the 10-point presented by of course, I mean, he's a professor, he's doing his job. But that is just, it's just skin deep. We are really talking about people who understand what is happening. And they took time to put a 16-page document, titled Resolution 684 on how to resolve the crisis in Amazonia. That's what we shall always stick on, is Resolution 684. And that has been the basis of the mediated process led by the Swiss. Everything else is, they're just trying to probably divert attention. Now they're trying to create a different epicenter of the struggle by pushing it to Canada and a Canadian professor. And they try to make it look, oh, this is a professor from a renowned university and all that sort of thing. That is, we are not children. As I made,
All right,
we
have another caller. Sorry, Dr. Mungwa, we have another caller. Secretary of State for Women Affairs, you are welcome to the program. You're live on ABC. Carry on.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dr. Mungwa. Thank you, Lady Casey. Thank you, Patty King, for the wonderful presentation. This professor is Canadian based, so I don't think he cares much about Resolution 684 from the United States. He has been very biased. If you go and listen to him in the past, he's written several things about our struggle, and I think he comes from the perspective where he believes more in federation, if I remember him from the past. So I don't think we need to take him that seriously. I really believe that we as Ambazonians, we will determine our fate. It's not up to the international community. The trick is unity for purpose. If most Ambazonians come out and they stand united for independence, we will have that independence recognized. And it doesn't have to be what somebody who is based in Canada or somebody who is based any part of the world tells us, or somebody who is based in La République du Cameroon. So that's what I just want to suggest. We can, as Dr. Mungwa said, push for that resolution 648 in the United States to be something that we really fight for, and I think we will be able to succeed in the near future. So thank you so much, and great show.
Thank you for your contribution. Have a great evening. And we will be rounding up in about 6 minutes. So if you need to call in, please call and make your contribution or ask your questions as we prepare to round up. We'll round at the top of the hour, and it will be 10 p.m. at home front. So Paddy, over to you.
Yeah, let me get this caller from home front real quickly so that yes, go right ahead. You want to make your contribution, your life.
Yeah, comrade, thank you so very much.
Where are you calling from precisely, if I may ask?
Dr. Mungwa.
Okay.
I appreciate you guys for the effort that you have been doing over there. You know, there is one thing that which is bothering me down here so much. About this guy called Chief Moja. He has been terrorizing our people. And secondly, the march that I see them, the people march at them, how did they call it again? They said that they do not want Amba, they want the same military. I want to ask that the atrocities that military have been causing, who have ever stand behind Mungwa to say that they don't want Amba military? Because the atrocities that the military have been causing is more than the one that Amba have caused. So, please, sir, even though we are talking down here, it is not really easy.
Well, you're calling from which county? Where are you calling from? From the home front?
See that things come to an end. Because
Where are you calling from, if I may ask? Which county are you calling from?
I'm calling from Kumba Eji.
Okay. Go ahead, and you have a few seconds to conclude.
From Kumba Eji.
That is good. Go right ahead, and you have a few seconds to conclude, please.
Yeah. So please, as I lightly said, yes. So please, I'm begging, we should put more effort to see that these things come to an end, sir.
Good. Thank you very much.
Please, I'm begging for you to right over there so that there will be more trust to talk about this thing to end. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you. God bless you too.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate the contribution from the gentleman at the home front. I understand the anguish of many Ambazonians, and I also understand the atrocities that are being committed by this terrorist. Yeah, Wanja. As I must mention here, if it comes to specific actions that need to be taken, I'm afraid that is the Department of Self-Defense that has to put together a mechanism to address such a local threat. So I wouldn't try to give a solution to it at this point. But I'm happy that now that you have raised it, it's actually it's a worldwide, and I think the Secretary of State for Home for Self-Defense is listening to this, and I will take that personal responsibility to bring it up to him when we meet in cabinet meetings or on a personal basis. Thank you. I understand that this is not just in your local area. It's actually in many parts of the country where we have local people who are presenting that threat to our communities. It's part of this struggle. It's part of this revolution. And remember, when we have when we'll get to a point where we're going to get a very powerful resolution, I'm sure all that will come to an end. And I can assure you that the interim government is working very hard to make sure that we get something that is going to address the future and realign our recognition at the highest level so that we all are proud and make sure that we can take care of our internal affairs. Over to you, Paddy.
Yeah,
Paddy, one moment,
You have
I
another
have a
call?
caller on the line who have been waiting
Yeah.
so much.
Go
I
ahead.
would just want to take this caller. I know we are preparing to round up, but the caller have been waiting for a while. Thank you so much for waiting, Pastor Victor. You are now live. Please carry on.
Thank you, Lady Casey, and thank you, Dr. Mungwa and Director Paddy for a great show. I just want to say that Ambazonians should not be moved by any talk or any write-up by a professor in Canada. We were once promised Norwegian professors that never showed up. And if a Canadian professor has come up this time but fails to do his research well, I think we are used to La Republic faking out people to stand and talk on their behalf. We remember the last election, is it in 2020, that they went and brought some fake people from, I think somewhere in California, and said they were Amnesty International that came to witness the election. So this is not any new game that La Republic is playing. And so it's an old trick which is not going to cause us any pain or will not bring any value to whatever they are doing. So I just stand to join my voice to you guys to encourage the people of Ambazonia to say, don't be moved with any so-called professor of Canada. It now tells us that unlike what Macron was even proposing out there, that it was the Canadian government or the Canadian whatever prime minister. It is just a sham and it was a lie. It was some kind of a private professor that came out there to give his view as to whatever they were meeting there for. And so that tells us that the Canadian government may not have even been current with what was going on there. They just rented a space and they brought a professor to come and make a lecture. And so I just want to encourage Ambazonians, let us be focused, whether a professor or not. A professor in Canada is not more than the American Senate and senators that are on our case. So let's stay resolute. And shame to the people in in Tombell who came out with a French mayor to come and make noise that they want military. Well, when the military will really turn against them, we will see who they will go out again to match that they want. But shame to the people wherever I forgot the name again, that came out to do that sham. And we want to let the Ambazonians know that don't fall for any of these things that most of these people who were in Canada, all these new name contractors that Mr. Ochemba gave them, that they came out of Canada with. We should not be moved by that. We are focused, and let's go draft for FACO this Saturday and make the ground hot for La Republic. Thank you so much. I know it's above our time, but God bless you for taking my call. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
I think,
Okay.
it's very excellent.
Press Secretary, I'll be giving you, I'll be requesting for some few more minutes so that we tackle something really vital. You've seen we are showcasing as we speak. If you're looking very clearly, we are actually showcasing to you the handbill of the President of the Federal Republic of Ambazonia. This is one of those exclusive interviews that you will not want to miss for anything in the whole wide world. There are lots of things happening right now. You can see the gimmick. Information is very important. You heard during the president's educative address, I would say the president's speech to the nation most often is history, documented,